We're moving right along, but I think we're at one of the most critical points in this project. We've got some serious design decisions to make. Before we get started, I just wanted to take a minute to thank you guys for the incredible response to the question that I posed in the last episode. I asked, what would you do for the top? Now, the interesting thing was, I never expected the type of response that we got. I put that question out there as a sort of an exercise for everyone else, because I was, I was contemplating some of the details, but I was pretty much set at that point, especially by the time I released the video, on what I was going to do. So it was very interesting and actually a really good exercise for me personally to take all of that feedback and digest it and do something with it. I mean, normally we work in our shops, we have an idea for a design, there's very little input from other people, and we're sort of married to that design at some point, and then, nothing really shakes our ground. We just kind of go through finished product and people either like it or they don't. In this case, I was still thinking. I was still in, in that sort of developing the ownership of this piece of furniture, and it was a weird thing for me, and I didn't realize it until I got all these responses, to have so many people giving me input on what I should do for this table, especially when I thought I had already made up my mind. So it was definitely a humbling experience and something that I'm really glad that I did, because I've never had to challenge myself that way before. The ideas were great, but initially, if someone comes in and says, I know you did this, but I think you should do this, sometimes that's hard to swallow. So it was not only a good exercise for you guys to see what, how you would have handled that situation, but it was really, really healthy for me to go through this and realize that, part of designing on the fly, even when it's other people's suggestions, you have to incorporate those, or you have to at least consider them as part of what you're doing. So, first and foremost, the most popular suggestion that we got, and man, we got over 60 comments on the blog, and I got another 25 emails suggesting different things. But the most popular thing was to turn the table upside down. Now, I have two reasons. I mean, it's a great idea. It looks fantastic, which is really interesting that it actually works both ways. The reasons I'm not going to do this, first of all, the dovetails. All of these dovetails are stopped, so you can't see them from this viewpoint. It's all butt joints from here. Okay, the second reason is my design that I'm going to do involves floating a panel in between the legs. So this amount of space is quite a bit less than what I have to work with when it's in this orientation, which makes it a more functional, usable table. So, the other way is a neat idea, and I think that might be for, version 2 or plan B. But for right now, I think we're sticking with this orientation. It just makes the most sense to me based on what I want to do. Now, interestingly enough, after the first few comments came in, it really got my gears turning. I really didn't want to use glass if I didn't have to, and it just seemed that that was the only logical thing to do when I had done the last video. And since then, I'd given a lot of thought, a lot of those comments came in, and I rethought what I was going to do. I've decided to do something that involves solid wood, no glass, and it involves, like I said before, floating a panel here in the middle. And I like this new idea so much that I'm actually not as concerned about seeing this center hub of dovetails. You can still see it if you look down, but I'm not hell-bent on doing that. I'm not even sure. A lot of suggestions were to put some kind of a circular glass peephole in the middle that you could actually see it. I don't know if I'm going to go that far. But I like this top so much so that I'm really not going to worry too much about the dovetails at this point. I'm really focused on making this top look good now. So it's kind of interesting, but it really was those first few comments that came in that got me rethinking what I was going to do and helped me change gears and do something that I'm going to be much more happy with in the end. A piece of glass on top is nice, but the glass is not my craftsmanship. It's nice to have a piece that from top to bottom and side to side, everything is from your hands. And a piece of glass sometimes steals away the impression that you get from the rest of the piece, because the glass itself can sometimes be beautiful. So for me, in this particular situation, it's just not right, and I'm happier that I'm not going to be using it. So let's jump right into it. You can see I've already removed the top and bottom material here, so let me show you how I did that. What I'm using here is a carving burr by a company called Cutsall, and you can find them at most woodworking supply stores. Mounted in my electric die grinder, this is one powerful carving system. With a light back and forth motion, I'm able to remove the bulk of the centerpiece. Ultimately, I'm trying to carve the centerpiece so that it not only matches the contour of the stretchers, but it actually becomes an indistinguishable part of the structure. I go as far as I can with the spherical bit, and then I switch to my flame tip bit. This specialized bit allows me to get into those really tight corners. Now take your time, be careful, and most importantly, enjoy the process. A little filing, a bit of scraping, just a bit of rasp work, and finally a light sanding bring the final shape to life. The process is pretty similar for the top, so here it is at lightning speed. And that, my friends, is why we do what we do. Now here's what I decided to do. I got really excited when I had the thought of actually being able to use solid wood for this top. And like I said before, encasing, when you've got these 4 points that aren't going to move and you put a panel in the middle, you're going to have problems. Just like a raised panel door needs to float, that panel needs to be able to move. So there's really no normal way that you can encase that panel or drop the panel in here. So what I decided to do is use a dowel, on each side to suspend that panel, almost make it look like it's floating. And each dowel will penetrate the leg and then into the side of the center panel. So, of course, at this point we have the question, well, this is already together. How do you get this dowel in there? You can't exactly just drill the holes and pop it in. It won't fit. So what I'm going to do is route them. What I'm going to do is actually use a straight bit that's the same size as my dowel rod, and I'm going to route a straight line in each one of these. That's going to be a perfect size for this to fit in. So as you can see, I've got blue tape around each leg, and that's going to help avoid tear out when the router bit pushes all the way through. And that's really the goal, is to plow through each leg. So what I need to do first is use a little adjustable square, and I usually line it up what looks to be about center, lock it in place, and then put one line on each side. And what that does is give you a line, or at least 2 lines, that tell you where the center point is. Now my router has a mark on it that tells me exactly where the center of that bit is, and once I line those up, I'm good to go. So we need a stable way to do this, right? You can't just balance a router up on this leg and expect it to work. So what I've devised here is a little system of router rails. One on each side. You can see I cut a little hole to give me that extra bit of room that I need. Put one of these on each side and clamp it in place, and now I've got a stable surface that I could ride the router on, and I could reference my edge guide up against the side of this material here. So let's do it. All right, so now we have a very stable work surface on which we could rest our router. And the key to doing this now is your edge guide. Okay, now most routers should have this mark here. It's a mark that tells you exactly where the center of that bit is. So sometimes it's actually much easier to work in terms of center points than it is to worry about the absolute left or right of a dado or a channel, in this case, the groove in the leg. Okay, so this line right there represents the center. So all I need to do is set my edge guide at the appropriate distance. So that line is perfectly lined up, and when it is, it's pretty close. Tighten it down, and that is it. So here are our 4 slots. Nice and clean. No going back now. All right, so I apologize for moving a little bit fast, but I really got into this and needed to focus, and it was a little bit hard to keep the camera running and worrying about all this stuff at the same time. So let me catch you up real quick. First things first, I needed to make a template for the top, and this is the shape I decided on. Kind of whimsical, reminiscent of a flower petal. It just seemed to appeal to the design that I already established of smooth, soft curves. Okay, so this is going to be balanced in between the legs. And the way I wanted to do that, well, before I go there, let me tell you about the template real quick. Template was really just a matter of grabbing what I had access to make these curves. I started out with a square, then I rounded each corner, believe it or not, using a paint can. It was the perfect diameter that I was looking for, so I basically put the paint can into the corner, traced a round. Then for these inside curves, I used this long compass. Okay, and I actually put the workpiece in the same position each time and had this at a set length and went back and forth and drew on my curves, then turned the template, do the other one. Then I rough cut everything out, and I realized that these 2 curves did not blend as well as I wanted them to, so that's where the French curve comes in. So it has to be one of my most underestimated but most used tools in the shop is the French curve, and I use that to blend these 2 curves together in a way that was just visually appealing. Okay, so once we have a template, you know how that goes, we've done it before. I basically get a panel of solid wood, and in this case it was from a really nice board of figured maple that I have here. Okay, jointed, glued 2 together, and went to the router table, did the flush trim, and this is what we wind up with. Okay, really nice shape, beautiful wood. Okay, so at this point we needed to put holes in the sides because I'm going to suspend the tabletop with these steel dowels, okay, little 3-inch steel dowels that were cut from a long rod. This is 3/16 of an inch, and I actually got this, pretty sure I just got this at Home Depot. Okay, so 3/16 hole into each center point on each side, okay, and I use my drill press to do that. Pretty straightforward, okay. The only other thing that I needed to do in preparation for putting everything together is these top slots here. Okay, this is where these dowels are going to rest. What I'm going to do is actually fill those, make it look like an inlay. I'm going to fill them with a piece of material that I created. It's a sandwich of 2 pieces of maple and a piece of walnut in the middle. And that's actually going to take up all that extra room there, cover it up, and make it look like it was an inlay. And it's just one of those things, a good example of how the solution to an issue or a problem that you have can sometimes turn into a design feature. And you'll see what I mean when it's all said and done. It's going to look like an inlay. No one's really going to, the average person that looks at this is not going to put 2 and 2 together and realize that that actually is a result of a solution to a problem as opposed to a design feature that we had decided on at the very beginning of the project.